Welcome to this week's edition of Pinellas Courtside Connection, where we take some time and break down all the latest scores, results, and rankings for the Pinellas County basketball scene. This week's show, talk a little bit about the Toy Drive shootout over at Northeast. We had some top games of the week that we'll start to break down a little bit, and we'll be joined by a special guest, Coach Will White, who will join us later in the show as we start to talk a little bit about the new rules that were implemented this year. This week even had a little bit of a curveball that no one could expect, as weather caused cancellations all around the county and all around the state, causing some anticipated matchups to be rescheduled and hopefully rescheduled, possibly even canceled. So lots to unpack this week as we take a dive into the latest results from last week. First, we'll go over to the girls' rankings and the girls' side, some top matchups last week. There was an anticipated matchup on Saturday with number one Lakewood that had to be canceled with Spruce Creek, thanks to the anticipation of possible weather. So that game was not able to happen, but Lakewood goes through and cruises through an early week matchup against St. Pete Catholic, as they are able to hold on to that number one spot in the rankings. Number two last week, in holding strong in the number two spot this week, Gibbs faced a tough Academy of the Holy Names team out of Tampa, one of the top teams in the Tampa Bay region, and managed to hold the Jaguars offense only 33 points. When you take a look at that Jaguars lineup top to bottom, they have one of the toughest guard combos in the area, and the fact that they were able to hold that lineup to only 33 points, solidifying that number two spot and starting to begin the conversations of who's number one in the county. Yes, Lakewood has that number one spot, a spot that they certainly deserve and earn, and Gibbs comes closer, knocking on that door at the number two spot with a big win over Academy of Holy Names. As we look ahead this coming week, Gibbs has another opportunity to possibly take hold of, or at least strengthen that conversation as to why they could be in that number one spot. This week's number three spot goes to Clearwater Central Catholic, 7-0. Hard to deny the undefeated start for the Marauders as the week plays out. It'll be interesting to see how things unfold in the coming weeks. In what was possibly the game of the week, bias opinions aside, of course, being that I coach at Keswick. Keswick and Clearwater battled Friday night over at Keswick in a game that ended up being decided by just 9 points in a one that the score doesn't even really begin to unpack how tight that game was. It was a game of runs, back and forth. Clearwater's got a tough young squad. With only one or two seniors in that lineup, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. The Lady Tornadoes, led by head coach Darian Dublin. Lots of scoring options between Pinky Sturdivant and Olivia Williams. Friday night, Olivia Williams goes for 25 points for the Tornadoes, but just wasn't enough to hold off the Crusaders, who jumped out to an early lead. Clearwater got into a little bit of foul trouble, which kind of certainly changed their game plan a little bit. But with the leadership of senior Ava Graham, one of the leading scorers in the county, who dropped 20, and Robin Cantwell, a junior for the Crusaders, finishing with 19, the Crusaders were able to hold on to that win. And certainly an anticipated matchup from last week, one of our games to watch. And with that, Keswick moves to number 4, overtaking Clearwater at number 5. Just a flip-flop of the top 5, something we've talked about all year. That top 5, pretty solid, pretty sturdy, with causing some shakeup, of course, but certainly a little bit of separation between those 5 and in the bottom 6 through 10. Speaking of which, let's take a look at that 6 through 10. Countryside checks in, still holding strong at number 6 with a 7-1 record. Last week, picking up wins. They had a big overtime win over Largo in a game that Allie Wright, a sophomore, scored 24 points. Actually, the Lady Cougars, led by a trio of sophomores. You have Allie Wright scoring 24, Kennedy Brooks scoring 18, and sharpshooter Julia Smith connecting on 3 3-pointers for 9 points. leading the way for Countryside. A young backcourt, young guard options certainly gives the Lady Cougars a lot to look forward to in years to come, but certainly this year, proving that they can compete, battled with a tough Largo team last week in an overtime win. Again, that's a big win for Countryside as they hold firm at number 6. Palm Harbor stays strong at number 7, followed by Calvary Christian. Calvary had a matchup with Keswick earlier in the week on Monday, a matchup that was a close game through the first half, and the Crusaders exploded for 24 points in the third quarter, leading the way to the victory there. Again, Calvary, a young squad, still trying to learn a little bit more about them as the year unfolds and more games get televised and able to catch out some more teams in action. But a young Calvary squad at 6-2 checks in, holding strong at number 8. Number 9, Largo Lady Packers, followed by number 10, Eastlake. It's always a toss-up trying to figure out who falls into what spot. But again, hard to deny Michaela Pascal and the Largo Lady Packers at number 9 spot as they check in. Again, losing a tough overtime game last week. They had a tough lineup last week. I think it was a three-game trifecta for Largo. Able to slide up one spot just ahead of Eastlake. As we look, see here, we have Eastlake coming in, squeaked out a win last week against Gulf High, a 4-point win. I think it was 39-35. Eastlake holds strong, still holding on to that top 10 spot, possibly without Avery Chapman for a couple games. We'll see how that plays out. Hopefully she'll be able to be on the mend and recover. Always hate seeing when players go down with injury, but always want what's best in a slow return when they're strong enough and healthy enough. Hopefully Avery Chapman see her back on the court soon. Is again one of the county's leading scorers in Pinellas County. Shaking up, let's take a look over at the games of the week this week. 3 games to really keep an eye on. It's a little bit of a strange week as you go into exams with a lot of the public schools. Some of the private schools are wrapping up. Keswick's already entered full-on break mode, but you have exam week. Those always throws a wrench into the schedule, rightfully so. Gives those kids time off to study and hit the books and kind of prepare for those exams. But still some big games ahead. As this week we look ahead, there's Tuesday on the 19th, Largo at CCC. CCC looking to protect their undefeated record at the Dome, battling against Michaela Pascal, number 8 in the state in scoring, averaging over 23 points a game. Should be a great game. Should be a tightly contested game. Be interesting to see how that plays out. If the guard pressure from CCC can prove to be a factor. Normally we keep these games to in-county matchups, but hard to deny looking at Gibbs when they host Plant next week. Plant's always a state title contender, always a talented team from over in Tampa. And what a matchup to be able to see this early in the year, Gibbs and Plant going at it head-to-head. And again, one of the games that's been circled on the calendar, at least on this half of the year, on Friday, Clearwater at Lakewood. Clearwater, again, that dangerous guard combo with Olivia Williams and Pinky Sturdivant leading the way. 2 of the top 5 leading scorers from the same team. It'll be tough to see if they can handle the constant pressure from Lakewood. Guaranteed to be a good matchup, guaranteed to have some high action, and look forward to catching up on and seeing how that one goes. Hopefully be able to catch that one in person. If not, hopefully the live stream works and we're able to keep an eye on that one. That all aside, let's switch over to the boys ranking side and the boys results. And man, I don't know how else to say it other than the parity in Pinellas County is certainly unmatched. It's hard. Be able to take in some of the games this Saturday over at Northeast and see some of the teams in action. I think the one constant that we'll see all year is that Gibbs is at top at number 1. And Gibbs, that tall, lengthy lineup, multiple scoring options with O'Neill Delancey and Jacob Daniels, among others, a host of others. Gibbs really poised to not only just take hold of that top spot in Pinellas County, but one of the top ranked teams in 4A. And man, could they be the team that ends the 20-year drought for a Pinellas County state champion in boys basketball? Certainly making their case early, loading up on that schedule, that strength of schedule, challenging themselves early to make a potential run into Lakeland for the Final Four, and hopefully would love to see Gibbs bring home a state title. It's always an exciting thing to line up, but that's the one constant. After that, I think you could probably throw 12 to 15, maybe even 16 teams and throw them in the hat, roll the dice and see where they fall, and you can make a case for those rankings. Still hard to break down and rank just 1 through 10 just because of the parity. On any given night, truly anybody can beat anybody. You look at last week. Last week, Eastlake slid into the number 2 spot. They end up falling to Countryside in a tough contested battle and lose to a Gulf squad that was looking to gain its form. So 2 tough losses for Eastlake, but still clearly one of the top teams in the county. They dropped to number 4 this week, taking over their number 2 spot. Seminole Warhawks coach Walker always has his team ready to go. Last week, 2 big wins against a solid Hollins team. It's been off to a great start. Coach Loster has Hollins Royals really up and running, and they win the Battle of the Bridge, the Seminole rivalry game when they play the other school. Sometimes see it referred to, but beat Osceola in an overtime matchup. Again, a game that was back and forth, and Osceola's sharp shooting and just pure volume of 3-point shooting was able to pull them back in the game, but not enough to hold off Seminole in overtime. So we have Gibbs at 1, Seminole 2, St. Pete checking in at number 3. Again, picked up wins over St. Pete Catholic at Pinellas Park. Hard to count out the Green Devils. Coach Blackwell always does a good job getting his teams ready. Year after year, back-to-back Final Four appearances. St. Pete, clearly one of the top teams to beat here in Pinellas County. Eastlake, like you said, number 4. Clearwater takes a big leap, moving up 4 spots to number 5. Again, any given week, any given opponent is ready with a chance to beat. Last week, they pick up wins over Lakewood and Dunedin. There are 3 losses this year. Check this: DME Black, Berkeley Prep, and Gibbs. Not bad, not a bad lineup when you take a look at their strength of schedule. Always looking for that next big challenge. Clearwater jumps 4 spots, partially just on how the other games played out, but certainly belonging in that top 5. 6 through 10, Boca Ciega, Coach Kaysen. Sorry, Coach, I think I messed up that record on that graphic there. We can correct that. Don't worry. We didn't knock you any wins there. Had a chance to see Bogey play this week, and Coach Kaysen, tough defensive team, just comes at you in waves. They just have a multitude of options and scoring options. There was a stretch where Jelani Nix was leading the way. Caleb Oriole dropped 24 in their game at the Toy Drive shootout, earning Player of the Game honors. And just tough scoring options, not to mention Jordan Naylor. Jordan Naylor, lefty, crafty guard, came over from Canterbury, now at Bogey. Certainly a contender. Followed up on the rankings there, number 7, Lakeside Christian, added to their win total today with a win over Keswick. They're followed up by Calvary, CCC, and Northeast. CCC and Northeast both move into the top 10 this week. CCC, hard to deny, 7-1 record. Certainly holding strong. Some big matchups coming up this week for CCC. I believe they have a game against Indian Rocks, which is always a private school showdown, a little bit more on the line than just your regular matchup. Interested to see how CCC holds up though as they start to strengthen up their schedule. Northeast, man, they were fun to watch. Northeast played Shorecrest over at the Toy Drive Challenge, in a game that was back and forth. It seemed like Northeast would jump up 10 and Shorecrest would battle back and close it to within 4 or 6, back and forth, back and forth. But the thing that impressed me most about Northeast is just their ability to change tempo. They could score in transition 3 to 4 seconds after Shorecrest scored a bucket, but then at the same time they could really slow it down and really work on ball control, not giving Shorecrest a chance to cut into their lead anymore. So Northeast Vikings, I think they only have one senior on their roster. So this year, next year, man, the Vikings are proving to be a top 10 team. As you look through, they had big wins over Shorecrest. They beat Lakewood earlier in the year and Countryside, and certainly some reputable losses with falling to Bogey, Eastlake, Osceola, and Brooks DeBartolo. That Toy Drive Challenge, it was Dominic Brown who ended up getting player of the game against Shorecrest, dropping again 24 points in an effort that it was just, again, a back and forth game for the Vikings and the Chargers. And the Vikings taking home the Santa Cup. I think it was Coach Banner coined it, in a series that has seen the Vikings win 3 of the last 5. So it's 3-2 in the series. That means the Santa Trophy goes home with the Vikings to be showcased at the school there. Hard thing is to believe that you have 4 or 5 teams that follow up behind. You have Hollins standing at 8-3, even though they had a couple hiccups last week. Osceola's had, again, a tough week where they dropped to games to an overtime game to Osceola and Palm Harbor. But Osceola, again, knocking on the door of the top 10, along with Largo, Shorecrest, Admiral Farragut. As we had mentioned last week, Admiral Farragut, a bit of an unknown, just lots of new players, lots of new faces on their team, and certainly was impressed with my guy, Danilius Galambauskis from Lithuania for Admiral Farragut. I think he ended up with 19 points, and him with Danilius along with Vuk Larovich in the middle for Admiral Farragut. Give that team some time, and man, they're going to cause some noise, and certainly in the 3A district that is really up for grabs. You can certainly make a run, and once you get that district title on your belt, who knows where it can go. Let's take a look ahead to games of the week this week. Games to get out your GoFan app, get your tickets, get out to a game, log on to NFHS, whatever it may be. Just some games to keep an eye on. Bogey at Lakewood, always a rivalry game. Two teams in the south side of Pinellas County. Coach Kaysen and Lakewood really looking to get back on track. I think they've lost their last 3 games. But don't worry, it's tough games. It's St. Pete, it's Clearwater, it's Gibbs. So don't read too far into it. It'll be certainly a matchup to watch, and an exciting one to go check out. That's got games Thursday at Lakewood. Another one on Thursday, if you can't make it down to Lakewood, Shorecrest at Hollins. Shorecrest saw them in action this week. Nicholas Bearden dropped 34 points in their game against Northeast, and Shorecrest just does a great job handling the ball, really kind of trying to control the tempo, and with strong guarded play and a big guy down underneath, Enrique Negron, who can certainly set some hard screens, go after the boards a little bit, but with Bearden out on the perimeter, knocking down threes. Shorecrest is tough, but it will be a good test for Hollins. Again, Coach Loster, an amazing job over at Hollins, turning around from a 4-22 year last year to an 8-3 start for the Royals. Really, it comes as no surprise after watching Coach Loster and his teams work hard all through summer league, all through Christmas tournaments or whatever. You knew it was coming, sensed it was coming at least. Done a great job. And then the final game of the week, look at Largo at Clearwater. Again, 2 tough teams. Clearwater sneaking into the top 5. Largo just outside of the top 10, knocking on the door. They're one of those teams that could really fall into place in that top 10. Give them a run. Largo has all the capabilities in the world to make a run together and be knocking. They very well could be on that top 10 list next week. Woo! That's a lot of talking on games come top 10 rankings. We'll unpack the leading scorers and other things later in the show. But at this time, we want to bring in Coach Will White, and I promised myself I would write down his bio because the credentials are lengthy if you don't know Coach White. But Coach has been a staple in the high school community in Pinellas County. As a girls coach over at Bogie, Coach led the Pirates to 3 Final Four appearances and 1 state runner-up appearance, and was recently elected into the school's Hall of Fame. An amazing accomplishment at Bogie. And not only that, he then goes to Northeast and really rebuilds a program over at Northeast. The Vikings, one of the winningest programs in the county during Coach White's tenure. But one thing, if you don't know Coach White, he won't tell you any of that because he doesn't want any of the credit to himself. Coach has over nearly 400 wins to his credit. I like to joke that Coach and I have a combined 395 win total on the varsity level. He just happens to have 395 of them. But Coach currently holds, reason why I wanted to bring Coach on, currently holds many hats over at Northeast, no longer coaching girls basketball, but coaching the bowling team, serving as an athletic coordinator for the Vikings, and really dives in on a lot of issues and in areas where you can look to improve opportunities for kids in the county. Coach White, one of the best, and Coach is also an active member of the Referees Association here in Pinellas County. See him wearing the pinstripes, can always give him a headache on the sidelines, and always looking for opportunities to teach and learn. Coach, welcome.
Good to see you. What an introduction.
Long-winded, of course. But, really wanted to bring you on just to kind of talk through some rule changes this year, some things that might cause some fans to yell in the stands that people might not realize what the changes are. One of the first rule changes, 5 fouls per quarter rule. The teams now reach a bonus when their opponent commits their 5th foul, and team fouls reset at the end of each quarter. The other big part of that rule, though, teams now shoot 2 free throws, no more 1-and-1s. So again, for those that might not follow so closely, normally the foul situation was shooting the bonus after the 7th foul in the half, with 1-and-1 until there was 10, and then there were 2 fouls. 2 foul shots once the team hit a bonus for 10 fouls and a half. You look at the early assessment of this rule and the games that you've been able to see and be a part of, Coach. How do you think this rule has played out so far early in the season?
I think a lot of the officials and even coaches are saying it's one of the best new rule changes, because rule changes happen every year. But this is one of the best ones that we've had in a long time. There was those games where you'd have like a ton of fouls in a quarter, and you're in the bonus early on in the first quarter, and then the second quarter is just a free throw contest, just multitude of free throws, and it was kind of hard to reset as a coach or as a defender. So now resetting at the quarter, it gives a team a chance to kind of, like, they have that bad quarter to reset, and you have a much better flow of the game. There's many times where, a team would have been going into the bonus in the second or the fourth period, and now it resets and you get really more on-court basketball action. And I always think that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's always. I really like the resetting at the quarter. It literally is a true reset, and you don't have to worry about, are there fouls that are being called that shouldn't be called. It allows a freedom from an official side, I'd imagine, to be able to make some of those calls, but also from a coaching standpoint, like you said, if you get in foul trouble 4 minutes into the first quarter, you don't want us to be putting the team in the free throw line all quarter long. So I think it's been great from a coaching side for me, but interesting to hear that on your side. When they passed the rule,
like what you said there too, I thought was really good, is sometimes, like, when a team's in the bonus and there's a foul that's kind of a foul, but you're trying to decide, it's 50-50. Do you let that go, mm-hmm. or because in that situation you're putting a team on the line, so you're kind of maybe a little bit more likely to call something that is more egregious. But this one, flow of the game is the big key. We want to have good flow. Yeah. So that hand check is more likely to be called because you're not in the bonus so early. So I think it gives a little bit more freedom to call the game in a way that's not going to hurt a team in that moment, but kind of help increase the entertainment, the flow of basketball by calling a few more fouls.
For sure. One of the things when they passed the rule, they talked about limiting contact on rebounds and the opportunities for I think the quote was limiting rough play opportunities. That's something that you've seen a difference in, and at least in those one-on-one situations. I think it's a bit more of a give and take, but anytime you talk about player safety, even if there's that chance of creating a more safe environment, that goes into consideration.
Well, where you really get into the trenches, so to speak, like in football, is on free throws. There's so much going on free throws. The officials are looking for violations and subs and all those sort of things. So you really have a few seconds of chaos on rebounding. So now, especially when on one-on-one, so you really have a real chance at opportunity when you're shooting both of those. Now on 2 fouls, you at least have that first one that's free. You're going to clean that up, and the second one you'll have. So that would reduce the amount of rebounding. It's almost like a kickoff in football. I mean, it really is one of the more physical situations. So if you're really trying to clean that up and get rid of that, that's another little unintended consequence of a double bonus that I really hadn't even thought of, but that's absolutely true.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a rule that we've seen in place in the women's game in college, and really seems to help the flow game. Clearly, there is watching many of those games. There was some conversation. I had to dig online and watch some interviews with some folks up north talking about how they felt that because the team shoots 2 shots on every foul, that it would limit comeback opportunities. I'm not sure I agree with that, because I do think, I mean, you might be more select on who you put on the line or who you're fouling in those situations. But is that something you think will come into play?
Oh, I don't know, because if you're really looking at like the bonus was really for the 7th, 8th, 9th, so only 3 fouls that were common fouls. So it really was kind of a small kind of niche. Most of those teams that when you got into the bonus, because if you even law of averages, let's say half of those fouls are shooting fouls anyway, so you're shooting 2. So I'm not really even sure how many one-on-ones you're really getting, because we were getting to that double bonus, that 10th foul most of the time. So I'm not sure there's going to be much of a change on that. But I do think that we were talking about this a little bit. I think the scoring is going to go down a little bit, because I think there were more free throw attempts, and that should be a pretty big scoring play. But you were talking about, but the double bonus does kind of balance that out a little bit, that you're getting 2 each time. And so I don't know. I'd be curious. We need a little more data than just a few games. Sure. I'm curious to see how the scoring, if that does anything with the scoring.
It's interesting, because I watched the videos and I was like, I don't know if I really agree with this. It's one of those things that change is not always accepted and not always welcome. I think in this case, this is a rule that is really improve the game and improves opportunities, improves, like you said, the flow of game, among many other things.
And that's what's most beautiful about basketball is the flow. The continuousness of it all. It's a beautiful ballet of athleticism that the more you can get that flow, the better.
No doubt. And I think we actually saw it come into play in our game on Friday against Clearwater. Clearwater picks up a couple early fouls and ends up and we're in the bonus, I think 4 minutes into the first quarter. And I was like, it's one of those, even as a coach that would have benefited from it, it was, as a fan part of it, you want to see that reset.
Right.
So certainly a good rule. Speaking of rules that have really enhanced play, I know you had your hands quite a bit in the 6-quarter rule, as it relates to girls basketball. And this is one where girls have in girls basketball, you can play 6 quarters in a night, 6 quarters of competition in any given day, I guess, day or night, whatever it may be. So you can play 2 quarters in a JV game, 4 quarters in a varsity game. And the when it was put before the board, it was approved unanimously. No one really questioned this. And I know you had your hands a little bit more in this rule and in the presentation to the board and everything else. Talk us through a little bit on the thinking behind this rule, and how we got to this point with the 6-quarter rule.
Yeah, so I was on the basketball committee for 3 years. One of the greatest experiences I've ever had to be on the committee, and all Marcia Pender and all these people around getting to talk basketball. But I came from a state when I was young and I was coaching. We had a 5-quarter rule in Missouri. You can play 5 quarters a day. And it was for the same thing. We're from at that point, it was to help rural schools that had a hard time fielding numbers. So, you could bring up that JV kid for a quarter, play them the whole game or whatever. So when I brought that up to the basketball committee before it moved on and moved up the ladder and things, I was like, hey, this is wonderful. Pinellas was having about half public schools, having about half their teams not having JVs, and just something had to give. And so I brought that up, and this was right after football had passed a 6-quarter rule for football players within the week. So JV players could play 4 quarters. So they wanted to kind of mimic. They were like, well, if we're going to give boys football 6 quarters, because I promoted 5, I think, because 6 is a lot. It's a lot of quarters. I'd rather have 6 than 4. And so then they came about that as a way to really juggle your roster. Plus, as a coach, I was always, if you have that 10th grader, that's your 7th, 8th man on varsity, they get so stuck sometimes. They're not learning that leadership and development, bleeding the JV, but you really need them to try to be competitive on the varsity game. And especially now in a world where regular season games matter, where rankings matter. In the past, only your district games really used the seed. So all those things kind of came together to say, how can we help those kids get on the court a little bit more, help their development, help save girls basketball, because the numbers are just continue to dwindle. And I think it's been a fantastic role. I think right now we only have 2 public schools without a junior varsity. And I think both of them are new coaches, St. Pete and Tarpon, I think. So give them a little time. So that's a tremendous, wonderful rule. I just love it.
No, I couldn't agree more. It's a great opportunity. I think you automatically see the benefit from it, right? Even just in a short couple of years of since it's been implemented. I think it was, and this is pre-COVID, so it has nothing to do with the COVID and everything else. But we had, I think it was 4 of the top of the largest public schools in the county didn't have JV teams on the girls' side. And that's
2,500 kids not having a JV. It was difficult for years and years and years. So something had to be done.
So, and that brings up a debate that I've seen online. I've had it with a few people. Why girls basketball and why not boys basketball as well?
Yeah, because for boys, it's not a problem. This isn't the rule wasn't to try to get 9th and 10th graders more playing time. It was to save girls basketball. And I can tell you as an athletic director for a long time, athletic coordinator, that, we might have 60 guys try out for basketball, and we might have, on a good year, 17 or 18 girls. The numbers just are not the same. And so it was a way to help those teams build through their JVs as well. You're stuck. You have a team that's developing and you have a decent freshman. They get thrown in the varsity and get beat by 60 points a night. Those kids were quitting. So this allowed them to kind of maybe thrive a little bit on JV and go and get that experience on varsity. So it really was a way to save girls basketball, not so much development, because the boys basketball, they see what's going on. They've gotten jealous, but that was the whole purpose.
I think like you mentioned, it's in a short period of time. You've seen the impact, and it's kind 100%. And hopefully that's just the start of it. That's not the end of it, and it's kind of it allows to create more opportunity and have teams that might not be able to. You might not be able to have a JV team if you only had 5 kids that were
right
in, but then you had 2 or 3 that are able to play both. It makes a huge difference.
100%.
So okay, I love the rule. You and I have talked about this, but I think it's good. It's important for people to understand the background to it and the why, how we arrived at this one. Since we have you on, we do have a bit of time. The ongoing conversation of max preps rankings and why they matter. It's one of those. It's a little bit tricky. I posted online last week about where the rankings fell for max preps as of December 13th, and I don't want to say it's comical, but it once you start to unpack it, you start to understand why. I think if you look straight max prep numbers as of last week, Countryside is 1, CCC's 2, and you have Gibbs and Lakewood. They're like 5 or 6. Yeah, so and again, it's early in the season, which a lot of reason is that part of it is the scheduling nuances of public schools in the county and who has to play who and when. But again, why why the max preps rankings matter is when FHSA made that switch from district champions and runner-up advancing to regionals. These rankings are the ultimate deciding factor for those next four. Just talk through a little bit on the improvements you've seen from that and how much that's at least improved the high school basketball experience overall.
Definitely yin and yang. I was 1,000,000% on board with that. Even when I had some bogey teams where our district was not going to be that challenging for the talent that we had that year, I argued for even a 1-game district, because back then, you were supposed to have 2 games with each team, and most of the teams, they still wanted to play 2, but I wanted to go out and like challenge our team, and I wanted those other teams to find like teams to play themselves, and I'm a big believer in data and analytics, and I found at the end of the year when all the data kind of rolls out, and I've charted this the last 10 or 12 years, end of season max preps ranking, and I found it to be extraordinarily more accurate than opinion polls, where it's just, had people used to argue about some of the rankings, and they even do right now, but it's, well, how many of these teams have you actually seen? So they can't see them all. So the data kind of reflects that. Are there weaknesses? I think the biggest unintended consequence was that in a good way, it made the regular season more meaningful, but in a bad way, I used to coach not really worrying so much about winning a lot of games. It was, let's develop and get better. But it changed to where you still wanted to do that, but if this game matters, it's a close game, maybe a little bit less likely to put a kid in to kind of give them the opportunity, because that loss could just tank you. So I'm a big believer in the rankings. Let the best teams get in. You can have some weak districts where the runner-ups were getting through, but I did like having the determined districts. So you knew who you were going to play, the winner, loser, cross reference, and now it could just be about just anybody. So, I like it. I think it's good. In the end, when the data works out, it definitely is an improvement.
Yeah, the other girls' max preps rankings showing there on the screen now at CCC, Countryside, Keswick, Gibbs, Lakewood, Clear. Not too far off, but from our top 10 poll, but certainly some differences again early in the year. And I kind of equate it to the MapQuest of old, where it could get you from St. Louis to Boston, but the second you needed to go to the corner of this intersection, it's going to send you down the wrong way 3 different times. And
the little details, the macro look is good early
for sure.
And early on, it does, I'm sure the algorithm is some sort of, it's winning percentage times strength of schedule. Yeah. So, CCC hasn't lost and Countryside has 1 loss, right? So let it play itself out. And by the end of the year, it's very, very accurate.
Yeah, and I do think it's important that people understand the why behind why are these rankings relevant, and not get caught up in what they actually are right now, but where they're going to be going. So I think once we hit the point where we're about 2/3 of the way through the season, there's very little movement at least from tracking them in years past and how that shakes out. There hasn't been too many surprises. But again,
year, it's pretty tight
for sure. I think when you have a formula where it allows a district champion to advance and possibly 2 other teams from your district to reach regionals, I think that's a huge advantage to the system. You have a district, I'm not sure what district number it is, but you have Lakewood, Academy of Holy Names, and Gibbs all in the same district. You mean to tell me one of those teams doesn't deserve a shot at regionals?
And I think it was either last year or the year before when you had Sefner, Brooks DeBartolo, Tampa Prep, and Carrollwood Day. I think maybe there were 4 girls teams that were worthy, in the region. So, it kind of gives those teams a chance.
Yeah, and just when we start to figure out how the classification system works and everything else, there's enough more changes on the horizon, I guess. But FHSA has talked a little bit about possibly implementing an open division. I know we've talked about it quite a bit. What the right number is: 32 teams, 16 teams, 8 teams. But I think the concept of an open division where you take the 8 best teams in the state or 16 best teams in the state and let them go head to head and let them battle out in a tournament unlike any other, certainly opens some interesting debates, some interesting conversations. What's your take on that, and do you think it's good for overall?
Yeah, I think the old classification schedule was, and I guess it still is, in outside of the open division, is by enrollment. Because in the past, that was a big factor. I mean, the more kids you had, the better odds you had to have a good team. Well, when we're an open enrollment state, and we've been that a while now, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing illegal about that. But the ease of movement,
Uh-oh. We lose Coach? Well, just as we reconnect here, just give Coach White hold that thought for a second. But talking just about a little bit about the classification system and how enrollment plays a factor. Anytime you have a high number of schools in an area, there's going to be movement, there's going to be transfers, there's going to be shuffling of who ends up where, thanks to just the system the way that it is. And you take an open division, you have a chance of the top 8 teams, whether it's 16, maybe 32, they're still trying to sort that out. What an opportunity it could be if you had those teams all face off head to head in its own separate classification, where you have top 8 teams in the state playing head to head. An interesting concept. Coach, you're back. Just explaining the top 8.
Welcome to the technology.
That's all good.
Oh, man, that's crazy.
That's all right. Just talking about, yeah, absolutely. Right. And it was just explaining a little bit about the open division and just the thought of, you take the top 8 teams in the state and you allow them to play head to head. Certainly an interesting concept. I think people will go and watch it. Where it plays out. Is it fair? Is it not fair? Is it water down the state title as it is? There's lots to be discussed there, lots to be debated, and unfortunately not a whole lot of time for those conversations to happen, but leads to some interesting conversations.
Yeah, if you really think about the old system where it was, by classification, they used to say, hey, here's the best in 7A. So those were supposed to be the best in the state. And it really wasn't watered down. It's who's the best on the like schools. Well, with open enrollment, an open division is like, those are the schools that are most like. They get a lot of people coming in. They have well funded, whatever that equals that out. So who's the best in that group? And just look at Pinellas. I mean, enrollment is not a factor in most of the sports. Football being different because they play so many players. But look at girls basketball the last 30 years in Pinellas County. Lakewood, the smallest public school, has been by far the best. Keswick Christian, 400 probably. I'm not sure what's Keswick's enrollment.
220, 230.
And so right up there as well. And look at Gibbs right now. They're less than 1,000. They're almost a third of the size of some of the bigger schools. So enrollment just doesn't matter. I'm from a small town where we just won our first state championship, and it was in the lowest level girls softball. And nobody was, but it's 1A. It was, we won a state championship. So we've talked before in the past, open division, I think is great. I think it'd be well attended. And I think that opens it up for some other schools to have that special, the teams that haven't had a chance to have a Final Four drive where the schools get behind you, the momentum is building, and each game's bigger and bigger. It's sad that it's kind of the same handful of teams every year. And to give those other teams a chance, I think would be great for everybody.
Yeah, I think it's an area that I think the FHSA board gets a lot of criticism on a lot of different topics. But I think one thing that I rarely hear people praising is they've made significant changes to level the competitive balance and to result in more competitive games. I know they shuffled the seeding for regionals, just as a simple thing as that once they did the district champions. So you didn't really have that mismatch in the 4-5 game. Now teams are seeded 1 through 8. And you saw an immediate impact in those changes, and you have more competitive games in the regional level, especially. That's what you want. I mean, as a coach, as a fan, as an athlete, you want a chance to compete. You want a chance to be the best team on that day to beat anybody.
For sure. And that's that was another rule that was actually talked about on the committee when I was a part of it as well, where, it used to be top 4 was district winners and all. They wanted to reward the district champion. And so I said, well, rank it 1 to 8. And then regardless of district champion or not. And then if like the 7 seed was a district winner and the 2 seed was a runner up, give the 7 seed that home game as the district winner.
Yeah.
So you don't get the double advantage of a top 4 and a home. But if you're a district winner and a runner up, give them the home game. And that's worked out really well. And because we did the data on the 4 or 5 games and the old best wild card was going up against kind of the weakest district champion, and it was in girls basketball was almost 80%. The 5 seed was winning, so this is much better. And give credit for trying. They have the last 10 years they're trying. They really
absolutely. No, it's they don't get enough. They put so many hours into it, and I think they unnecessarily take a bad rap for what people might scratch the surface without even really unpacking all the implications and all the different changes. And they really do a good job. We have about 10 to 15 minutes left on the show here on Pinellas Courtside Connection. So what better thing to bring up than my favorite conversation with basketball, the shot clock? I don't want to really go down the weeds of is it good, is it not? Unfortunately, I think it's inevitable. It will come when the rule was passed that the shot clock could be implemented in Florida. It was on a trial basis, and it was if both teams agree. We're in year 2 on that, and just not seeing. I don't know of any outside of tournament play if that's happening. And again, you wear many hats, not just as an official or as a former coach, but as an administrator. Why do you think that is?
So I teach American history, and the first thing I teach is if you don't know what something's about, it's probably about money. Not that everything, but you kind of start there, right? You just start there. Yeah. So it's expensive, and no matter what anybody says, even the cost of putting the equipment in or whatever, that can be handled, right? It can be. As a athletic coordinator, it's hard to find good event workers that want to work a lot. And so to try to train and pay someone for a shot clock, that those resources could be used elsewhere. They just really could. I've seen games this year already, and almost to a fault, a team who's trying to hold the ball for too long, stall early, they're going to turn it over. They're just not equipped in high school to really, they don't put that kind of time into it to be able to do that. So to me, it's a solution without a problem. It just unintended consequence. And then as an official's point of view, or as a coach, I'm going to put my coach hat on here for a second. Yeah. Let's give the officials something else to worry about, right? Like we want to complain about them missing this and missing that. Let's give them a something else to worry about on every possession. I think that is just a catastrophe waiting to happen. You have, let's be honest, amateur officials. I'm an amateur official. I'm a high school official, right? Four of them. And now you're adding that, and the eyes just up on the shot clock, or did it get reset right? Or you have a kid on the clock over there who's messing it up, and you need to get it reset. It's going to kill the flow. It's going to cost money. It's going to distract the officials. To me, there's not that much. Put it in AAU, right? If you want to know if it's college track and you really want to do that, and why isn't it an AAU? Because of money. So it all comes full circle.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I think it's the debate whether it improves the game, does it not improve the game. I just don't know if it improves a high school game, and that's the biggest thing. And sorry to throw that one at your way, but I know you have a good perspective. And again, wearing many hats, I think people forget from a coaching side. You watch these college teams that play and prepare for it, and they have 4 to 5 weeks to prepare for their first game. And it was last year with Keswick with volleyball runs and everything else. We had 5 practices. So you throw in a shot clock, and it's going to somehow make watching it better. It's a tough one. Again, I know it's a very opinionated topic that people will go down the rabbit hole. But I certainly appreciate your insight on that, Coach. And thank you so much for joining Pinellas Courtside Connection tonight. It was always good to get a unique perspective. If you could throw you one more question on it, if you, as a ref, what's something that you hear from the stands way too often that just makes you cringe a little bit, and you want to kind of give that tutorial a little bit about what the rules might be?
3 quick ones. One is over and back, where people, they don't understand there's 3 things that have to go over. It's right there in the rule, over and back, right? So to be over, you need both feet and the ball. So if not all 3 of those elements are over, it's not over and back. So sometimes it looks fishy, but if all 3 haven't been over, you're still in the back court and you still have your 10 count going. So that's something to pay attention to. The other one is block charge, of course. That is that they weren't set. And that is just so funny because that's not the rule. And we won't go into the depth of legal guarding position.
Yeah.
Basically, if I faced you with 2 feet on the ground, I've established defensive position and I can move. I don't have to like take one to the face, and get run over like a Mack truck, be a charge. So more charges should be taken. We just saw Kim Mulkey getting mad about a call, and it was a good call on a block charge. And maybe the other one is over the back, which we talked about.
Over the back and over the back, two different ones.
Correct. So over the back is not a rule. It's not a mechanic. It doesn't exist. You can push somebody, but if you're athletic enough to jump over somebody and grab the ball, that's not a foul. So I would say those are the 3 big ones. For sure.
I think it's great to have officials that are willing to have the conversation and willing to educate outside of the game, not just to be able to talk rules, to be able to talk nuances of the game, so we can all gain a better understanding of it. And I think it is important as parents are sitting watching these games. Without these officials, these games don't happen. And it's as simple as that. Some of the things, don't go too far as you're watching these games. Ultimately, the officials are trying to do the best that they can do. There's a ton of great ones in Pinellas County, not just good ones, but great officials in the area that do a great job calling, but also managing the game flow, because there's so many things that go into that are the unwritten rules. Maybe that's not the right way to put it, but to help make the experience as good as possible for everybody. And without the officials, we can't have those games.
And you have to think, a lot of these people, some are retired, but a lot have worked a full day. They're doing this, the pay's okay or whatever, it is what it is, but most are doing because they love the game. And you're going to get different personalities that get mixed in there, but they really are doing it for love of the game. And there is a officials shortage epidemic. So just trying to make sure that they have a good experience, it's really difficult. And it's almost like holding in football. You could call that every time. So what officials really try to look at, which is they're not perfect with, is advantage and disadvantage. Did someone get an advantage on something? And then you call it. And if not, you really, again, want to have that flow. Otherwise, you could literally call a foul on every possession. So just looking at, was there an advantage? Was there a disadvantage? Yeah. And that's the lens you're looking through. And one last thing with officials is, especially when there's only 2, the best view is from the sideline. It is from the stands, and it's the coach's box. It's that straight through view. But when you only have 2, they each have to have a corner, basically, so they get off. So not making an excuse. It's just a very different angle everyone else is looking at. And so that makes it very difficult. And when you have that third ref, that's where it is a lot cleaner, because they are looking at that coach's perspective, that straight through line. And so it does make.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome insight. Thank you so much for joining us, Coach White. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your perspective. And above all else, appreciate all that you've done to help grow, not just girls basketball, but bowling and everything else through all your leadership over at Northeast, but through the county. So appreciate all you do, Coach. Look forward to seeing you around. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
Well, it brings us almost to the top of the hour with this week's edition of Pinellas Courtside Connection. Be sure to follow on social media. We'll be posting the county's leading scorers. We'll be reminding you of games to watch, maybe some games that slipped through the cracks as we're doing our prep work this week. So be sure to follow us on on social media. Be sure to get out and support local basketball. There's a number of tournaments coming up. We'll start to scratch the surface on social media with what those schedules look like through the Sun Bash over at Northside, the Keswick Suncoast Classic in its 40th edition at Keswick. That will be both tournaments being December 28th, 29th, and 30th. Stay tuned for more updates when it comes to that. We look forward next week to getting our co-host, LaQuanda Jones, back on the show, giving her insights. She always has such a great perspective after catching games in action. But that brings us to a close of this week's Pinellas Courtside Connection. Thank you to Totem Pole Nation for hosting this conversation. We look forward to seeing you online. Comment, click, like, share, do all those fun things. We want to keep this conversation going and do anything we can to shed a light on some of these great student athletes that are playing basketball in Pinellas County. Thank you again for joining us. Once again, thank you to Totem Pole Nation, and we'll look forward to seeing you all next week.